to everybody involved in this tragedy, to the families, to everybody who, relatives, loved ones, friends, our deepest condolences, and we as a community are praying for you, because this is a tragedy. Know that you're not alone. And as we're going to talk about, these tragedies, unfortunately, are suicides, the harming of other people is becoming commonplace, and we don't want it to be. And so please know you're not alone. Please know you grieve not alone. We're all going through this together. Last night we had a horrific tragedy in the Lake Padgett area of Land O'Lakes. All evidence shows that a young mother, she killed her 3-year-old son, she killed her 9-month-old son, and then she turned the gun on herself and killed herself. There was no cause of history at this location. Pasco had no interactions with these individuals before this occurred. Our parties last night were for the grieving family. We had victim advocates go out. There's family members that don't live in the area. We had to make sure that they were aware. And we try to get them as quick as possible, because unfortunately in today's world with social media, we know how fast things get out there, but we think that people should learn through a chaplain, through a professional that goes out to the house, rather than looking on their social media account and getting information. So we had to work with several counties to get that information out there. We worked with victim advocates here for the family that was here in the area. For the deputies, detective, crime scene techs, the call taker, the dispatcher who got this call, we wanted to make sure that they also had mental health counseling. And Lieutenant Cole Howard's here, he's in charge of our SISM team. We wanted to make sure that they also were cared for. Forget, we're not robots. We have children of our own, we have loved ones, and you go into that scene, that impacts you. That's something that lives with you. The other one is ensuring that the public knew that there was not a public safety issue. This is an isolated incident. And so when you have 20 to 30 law enforcement officers out there, I can understand people in the community get upset, they get nervous, the rumors spread very quickly. So that's why we pushed out a media alert. That's why we put it on social media. So we wanted everybody to realize this is an isolated incident. It was a horrific incident, but it was isolated. There was no threat to the public. So that's why we want to make sure that information got out there. The reason I'm here today is because I want to talk about this mental health crisis we're in. We've talked about it before. The tragedies that we saw last night emphasize the fact that we got to keep speaking. We got to keep speaking louder and louder and louder. And so it gets through everybody out there to realize that we are in a mental health crisis. We in Pasco County are just like everybody else in the nation. We are in the heart of this crisis. We believe that 80% of every call for service has a mental health component to it. I'm just not talking about that we get called out because somebody says I'm in a mental health crisis. I'm talking about every single call for service. When you see a patrol car going to a call for service, we are responding to a call for service. It could be a domestic, it could be a substance abuse call, it could be a runaway, it could be people attempting to commit suicide, which is clearly a mental health call, but it could be calls like trespassing and loitering. 80% of all calls that we go to, we believe, have a mental health component to it. Unfortunately, law enforcement, we are the tip of the spear addressing mental health. And as we saw last night, and in too many of these tragedies, law enforcement is only called when a crisis has hit a tragedy. And last night was absolutely a tragedy. From social media, peer pressure, tense conversations people are having with each other, we need to realize that this crisis is not going away, and our children are suffering. As much as, as adults, we're going back and forth, and people go on social media, people go talk, and there's those tense, harsh conversations. Think about everything, every decision that we make as adults, as government makes, as schools make, everybody makes, there is an absolute direct impact on these kids. And if we don't think our kids don't have it worse than we did growing up, we are fooling ourselves. Our children have it way worse than we ever did. As I said earlier, law enforcement, we're just the tip of the spear of this mental health crisis. And too often law enforcement is called when that tragedy occurs. But we have to do one thing, and we have to break the stigma. We have to break the stigma on mental health. We have to break the stigma that, it's a law enforcement issue. We have to stop that. We have to recognize this is a mental health crisis. It's a healthcare crisis. Law enforcement is only part of it. And as a country, we have to first acknowledge that. I'm saying this right now. I say it from Pasco County in Florida. This is a national issue. This is a national issue. It has to be addressed. We can't just keep pushing it under the rugs and keep talking about it. But like everything else, it's the issue that law enforcement gets called to go fix. Go fix it because nobody else wants to. And then when something bad happens, everybody blames law enforcement. And I think every law enforcement official will tell you it's a healthcare crisis. Healthcare. It's the same with addiction. Addiction is a healthcare crisis, but who does everybody put the blame on? Law enforcement. It's got to stop. We have to pony up, put the money where it belongs, and deal with a healthcare crisis. And this mental health care crisis isn't going away. This is going to be generational. This is an issue that is going to continue. As long as we have social media, as long as we have people fighting with each other and people disagreeing and not in civil formats, we can civilly disagree. But when people are uncivilly disagreeing and fighting with each other, it's only going to multiply. And tragedies that we continue to see are going to multiply also. And it can't be normal. It can't be normal to go to a situation where a mother kills her kids. It can't be normal that we're going to continuously go into suicides. We're going to these overdoses. That can't be normal anymore. No, as a sheriff's office, we are addressing it. I'm not just saying it's other people's problem. I know we have to deal with it. Because if people are going to call 911, we will. Major Capusa here. Major Capusa oversees our behavioral health intervention team. It's probably the largest in the state of Florida, if not one of the largest in the state of Florida, because we started pulling resources and said we recognize if nobody else is going to address this issue, we will be out there. We will be the tip of the spear to try to help. But I'm telling you right now, we need other people's help. I want to thank Baycare. Baycare is our partner in Pasco County. They are always out there with us. NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, they're a partner with us. The Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, that's another center we have with us. We're building that coalition. And the Pasco Public Schools. I can't thank our school district enough, Superintendent Kurt Browning, because he recognizes, like all of us, that if we don't address this with our young kids now, the problem's going to continue to grow and get worse. We have to address this issue, and we have to especially help our kids. And I'll leave you with this again. We have to break the stigma of mental health. We can't just think it's going to go away. We can't just think that this issue, it's only a few other people. If I can talk about, like, hey, if I break my arm, people have no issues talking about somebody with a broken arm. But if I say, hey, I'm going through a mental health crisis, I'm going through some issues, I'm concerns, I went to a horrific scene, people, it's mental health, they don't want to talk about it. We have to stop that. And it's not a weakness. Being bruised by mental health is not a weakness. I dare you, not one of you would ever go up to a veteran who served in combat overseas who say, I'm dealing with some post-traumatic stress. You wouldn't call them weak. Nobody should ever call them weak. It's the same thing with people in our own communities. Because they're going through a crisis, nobody's ever walked in their shoes. Their crisis may be different than yours, but at the same time, we have to break that stigma. We have to recognize that we're all individuals. None of us walk on water, and if somebody needs a hand up, we will help them up. And we're not going to criticize them because they're asking for help. We should applaud them for that help. We should applaud them when they say, I need help. Am I passionate about this? Absolutely. I'm absolutely passionate about this. Is this the number one issue we have to address? Absolutely. We deal with this all day long, from the patrol to detention. Everything we do in law enforcement, I say 80% of our calls for service have a mental health component to it. We're getting overwhelmed. And the tragedy of last night was absolutely horrific. It's so sad that families grieving with that, and we're trying to prevent another tragedy from occurring. So with that, is there anything, there's certain things I will be able to answer, I won't be able to answer. It's still an ongoing investigation. But from the mental health component, we need to absolutely talk about this more and more every day.
Sheriff, do you know what led up to this?
I'll let Sergeant Rosa, he's major crimes sergeant who's overseen it, so I'll let him talk about what he can talk about the case on that.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Rosa, R-O-S-A. I'm the sergeant with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Unit. So a lot of the questions I can't answer, ladies and gentlemen, because it's very sensitive and we're being very concerned about the families involved in this. The only thing I can say, sir, that this incident was involving a small family and that they had some type of dispute at this time.
Age of the mother?
I cannot release that right now because of different laws, Marcy law, that may lead you to the victim's name, so I apologize.
are there any other kids involved, and or where's the father?
So the father has been 100% cooperative with this investigation. And there is no other kids involved at this time.
He said this was a 3-month-old and a 9-month-old?
Yes, sir.
Three-year-old.
I apologize. 3-year-old, yes, and 9-month-old. I saw her.
How did the call come in? Was it from a family member or?
So I could release that. So the father called the Pasco Sheriff's Office. Well, we contacted 911.
And he lives at the same home?
Yes, he does.
Is there anything more specific you can go as to what the mental health issue was in this? Was there a social media issue component to this? I'm just trying to figure out exactly, I mean.
I understand. It's very vague at this time. So right at this particular time, we have no social media aspect involved in this investigation. It appears to be that we do have a possible mental health illness involving our female involved in this incident, but that's really all I can release at this time.
Any prior domestic issues at that address?
No, sir.
You know where the father at the moment of the?
Yes. He's 100% cooperative with the investigation, and he's right now with his family.
Do you know around what time he responded?
I don't actually have that time. Just before 6 o'clock, excuse me.
So, hey, Bruce.
Excuse me.
Very quickly, so just a little bit, I know there's a lot of questions going to be out there, and I know we can't answer a lot this time, but I'll try to put a little bit of ease and a little vagueness, but I think you can connect it all together. So couples argue sometimes, and so maybe some arguments may have led to, you know, people being upset. The father, all indications, was not at home when this incident occurred. He walked in on it. Why we can't give a lot of information is because we have to follow Marsh's law. The other side of it too is what I ask of you. I know people are going to post stuff. I know the information will be out there. People are so quick to go on social media to post things. Just give a little time before you approach that family. If that family wants respect, please give them that respect. If they want to talk, they're free to do that. It's a very difficult time for them. I can imagine. I can't imagine what they're going through. But at the same time, I know the public wants to, what's going on? If you're married, you know, people in relationships, they have arguments. Some people take it a little harder than others. Instead of reaching out and seeking help, people make horrific decisions. And it looks like last night somebody made a decision that's beyond horrific. And, you know, those are the type of things that, you know, we talk about. If you're in a crisis, if you're leading up to a crisis, if you're leading up to a crisis, things are going on. There's resources out there, and that's why I say the resources are limited. But please know there are resources out there. Those are the type of things, you know, we just want to explain a little bit, but go to the global aspect of what we're dealing with, and what we're dealing with is a mental health crisis to reach that point. You know, there was no other children at the house. There was only 3 of them in there, and that's what the father walked in on.
Was the gun legal, and do we know if it was hers or his?
So I can't answer that. Yes. So at this particular time, everybody in the household could possess a firearm for the state of Florida, and the firearms are legal. We have no history back on the firearms. And what was your other question, sir?
If it was the wife's or the husband's?
It appears that belonged to the husband.
Are you guys releasing any names of those involved?
Not this time, sir.
And you said the husband walked into the home to find them?
So the incident, just to clarify a little more, which I apologize, I know it's very vague. To clarify a little more, the incident had been done at this time, and he walked in and found it. He was the first reporting person.
And do you know if you'll release the 911 call that he made?
I don't know that yet, sir.
Do you know where in the house he discovered?
I could say in the bedrooms.
Any additional question?
Sheriff, what do you want? I mean, I know this is something that you're passionate about, but what are some of the things that you would like to see changed, or is there funding for this that you prefer to kind of address and help this mental health crisis, or what are things that you want?
Right. You know, it's interesting the fact that, you know, what I like. I would like us to sit down and not just have a sit down where everybody sits down and says we're going to do something and nothing gets done. That's the biggest waste of time we all see. The other part is we don't want to jump and say, okay, you know, we've seen it before where there's different drugs and people say, we're going to throw all our money at cocaine, crack, now we're going to throw at heroin, and you address it that way. There has to be a global view, people getting together and saying, okay, we absolutely, you know, and it has to start in small increments. When you bring too many people in the room, everybody gets in that room and they say, we're going to do something, high five, and nothing ever gets done. But it has to be small things. It has to be, you know, where money's resources are spent. So I'll tell you the first thing. If we can create partnerships with the ERs, the emergency rooms, and that's where Baycare's been a great partner. Get all the hospitals together. If you go to an emergency room, a lot of times the same people that 911 as law enforcement officers we get called out to, the same people that fire rescue get called out to, are the same people that walk into the ER room. You know, that's a group of people that if we can address and say, hey, how can we help those people, you know, before it becomes a crisis, and we can proactively have people go out to their houses before they use the ER, before they call 911, before they call fire rescue, before they commit a tragedy, we'll be way more efficient, way more effective, you know, in helping them out, preventing these crises. For our kids, you know, we have to do something, you know, those kids, they get overwhelmed with so many classes, so many this, but we really need to have, you know, explain to them about the crisis on social media. You know, somebody referred to yesterday, it was a good friend of mine, he said it's a plague. Social media is a plague. It absolutely is a plague. We have to get them off the social media. We got to get them back engaged with her, talking to each other, hanging out, doing things, you know, spending time with each other. You know, is it volunteering more? Absolutely. Because if we can create empathy with teenagers, we can get them to understand that it doesn't matter what other people are saying about, you know, social media. What matters is, how do I help somebody in my own community? You know, those are those little things that we can make a difference. You know, if I had a wish list, I can go through a million things on the wish list. But it all starts with that little spark. And that little spark is address the little things first. Start coming at them. You know, when we talk about mental health, I would love, you know, people who think celebrities that we should, you know, listen to what they're saying and those type of things. We should start with the celebrities getting out there and talking about mental health. Start talking about these things. You know, when they have to put something on their social media account, talk about mental health. Saying suicide is not the answer. Getting these kids to realize that they have value, they have worth. You know, getting them back engaged with the churches. These are the things that will make a difference. You know, we have to get back to the basics. We advance very quickly. Society's moving quicker than our minds can program it. We have to get back to the basics, because these are the type of things that are overwhelming people. These are the things that are causing the crisis. And every day when there's a new crisis, every day when there's a new issue, every day when everybody's fighting with each other on social media, it's only drawing us down. We have to get back to the basics where we can get back helping each other, getting our teenagers to realize it's better to help somebody else than to help yourself. Those are the things that will empower them. Those are the things that will build them up. And those are the small things that will make a huge difference. So apologize. I'll be in that meeting when hopefully people get together. But I want it to be a meeting where things actually get done. And we just don't go back in a room and say we're going to do something and nothing ever gets done.
Can you talk about just the compounding issue with something like this incident itself, just what it means to the family, the victim's friends, people in law enforcement who have to respond, because this one incident now gets spread for mental health-wise, where all these people now are being affected by it.
No, you know, this is a tragedy that lives with people forever. There's no doubt about it. It's going to live forever for that father. For the rest of his life, he's going to live with that tragedy. For the other loved ones, they're going to live with that tragedy forever. For those detectives, deputies, crime scene techs, it's going to live with them forever. You know, if you don't think law enforcement doesn't have PTS, we all have PTS from the scenes we've seen. You, in the media field, you get called out there, you live with these. Every time you go past somewhere, you constantly remember this scene. You remember what happens. People in the community think about that. Here's the issue. Beyond having to deal with that crisis that occurred yesterday, we have to address it. We have to put resources towards it. But at the same time, we cannot normalize suicide. We cannot normalize homicide. Because when we normalize these things and we make people feel like, oh, okay, yeah, everybody does, it's normal, you know, then unfortunately we keep getting more people that when they reach that point of crisis, you know, we would hope at that highest point of crisis they seek help. But if they think it's normal to take their own life, the crisis only gets worse. So that's why it's a very dangerous thing. It's a very fine rope we walk on, because we don't want people to normalize it at the same time as we got to get the message out to get help. But from the long run, this affects everybody. This affects the kids that are driving into school in the back of their parents' car and hearing them talk about on the phone with somebody saying, oh, can you believe this happened? We don't think those kids are listening. and then going back to school and talking about this, those schools all around that area in Lake Padgett, if we don't think they're not talking about this today, we're kidding ourselves. That's why the public schools, having all the schools engaged, it's critical to that. Anything else?
I noticed that this was a small family. Do you know how many other family members live in the area nearby, or was it just that one immediate family in the home?
So that this is a single-family dwelling. There's only one family living in there. However, this is like shattering glass. This spider effect that there's multiple families affected by this one incident, if that answers your question, sir.
And they live in Pasco County? or-
So no, they live in multiple counties. But yes, there is some family members that live in Pasco, but there's other counties involved at this time.
All right,
You're
thank you all very
welcome.
much.